Yeah.
So, hello again, everyone, and here we are. We're at the grand finale of the Seven Habits, and it's been fun doing it, Mike. I've really enjoyed the Seven Habits, and as I said right in the beginning of this thing, the book has probably been one of the books that's impacted me the most in my life. It's one of those books that I paid my kids to read. And it's certainly one of those books that I try to read, listen, and play in that space every year of my life, And so, yeah, those seven habits have really impacted me greatly. So I just thought it'd be great. Let's just talk about those seven habits and how they have affected us, and maybe which ones have affected us more, and so on. So yeah, let me start by throwing the ball to you again then. And say, so Mike, the seven habits, we've looked at them all. Which ones have impacted you the most? And, what's your commentary on this?
Yeah, look, I think my first commentary would be, I don't know how old the Seven Habits is, but we must be going back sort of close to 30 years now, hey, Dave? Early 90s, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And there's something about good principles that they really are timeless. They traverse generations, seasons, and I think just going back to the Seven Habits, how many of the books that we read today are just sort of expanding on these habits? And again, even Stephen Covey, it's not that he was the first to talk about many of these things. I think seek first to understand, goes back to some Greek thinking, and then we can also find it in the Bible and works like that, So probably the first thing that really strikes me as we've gone through it is the need to continually keep returning to solid, good principles, especially in times of turbulence. Go back to principles. Maybe when the world's a good place, you can do other things, but definitely in challenge, what are the right things to just be focusing on?
I really like what you say. They are principles, and principles are timeless, and principles work almost outside of paradigm as well. A good principle, you can take it anywhere in the world and it's going to work, right? And I think what's been good about the Seven Habits is actually they build on each other. They actually are all interlinked principles. I'll give you an example. It's very difficult to do the win-win principle, the principle of trying to find that third way, that win-win, without first seeking to understand before being understood, right? So those two principles, they have to go together to work well for you. But then you have to have the principle of being proactive. A lot of people never sort problems out because they're never proactive in trying to sort those problems. They never create the opportunity to have the conversation, to have the win-win, to seek first. You have to be proactive in doing that. And I think that it's impossible to take any one of these principles on their own. I think all of them must lead one to the other. And those are principles. If you do these well, you are guaranteed the result. That's what a principle does, right?
Yeah, and I really love what you're saying there, because it's about balance. If you are just seeking to seek first to understand before being understood, but not necessarily being proactive, there could be an imbalance in your life in terms of it's great. You're strong in almost that green persona, that people person.
Yes.
But you also need to drive your own life and take responsibility. So I suppose an interesting thing is I work with a personality profile called Lumina, but part of the language that we use is, what do you need to dial up? So let me ask you that question. And sorry, I think I've turned the tables on you. But Dave, the reason I'm turning the tables on you, I look at your shirt and I go,
a man of hope.
That's quite a brave shirt to wear when speaking to a South African. It shows short-term memory.
No, what it shows is a man of great and continued hope.
Yeah.
We support in times of adversity. That's what we do, you know.
But if you had to be dialing up something here, is there one that comes to mind for you, which says, in actual fact, as we've done this, I need to dial this up. I need to focus some attention.
Yeah, and I think the area that probably needs focused attention is the first things first again, because you know for me in the busyness of life, and certainly there's a lot of busyness right now. It's very easy to lose the guiding principle, the guiding direction, you know, in my life. I have to say one of my weaknesses is I say yes to too many people. I need to learn to say the word no more. And it's got me into a lot of trouble in the past, because I guess I want to aim to please and I like to feel significant, and those are all good things. But if you do too much of that, I find myself then sitting back and going, well, hang on, I've lost direction. Where am I going?
Yeah.
You know, Covey talks about finding your true north, which I think is that's a conversation we should have on another day, you know. And that's the issue of centering yourself, isn't it? Coming back to what is your internal, you know, here's the thing. When my calendar is more important than my compass, I'm in trouble.
That's well put.
When my calendar is more important than my compass, I'm in trouble. And it's very easy for my calendar to be the loudest voice, and I lose sight of my compass. And I think that's what first things first for me is about grounding myself and coming back into a line with true north and saying, yeah, I'm going on the right track, you know. That helps.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I love what you said there about you know, your compass, putting your compass first. Head of Canada, that's really difficult to do, hey?
It is because of loud voices, and you know, as I said, the willingness to want to please people, which isn't a bad thing. It also is a trap that we all fall into.
Yeah. Okay.
And you, which one are you needing to dial up more?
Yeah, look, I suppose all of them in a way, but you know, the one that for me is I wouldn't say it's a weakness, but it's but definitely starting with the end in mind. So I tend to really focus on what do I need to do well today, which I think is a good thing. But sometimes you can forget that there is something you're building, an alternate future you're creating, and I definitely don't spend enough time just in that place of visioning that alternate future. And I think I move more into the practical doing. And like I said, I don't think it's necessarily it's definitely not all bad. There's but there is just so much room as well for the end in mind, and then almost backtracking because that's the end in mind. What is it that I therefore need to do well today? And so I know my wife, Mandy, she sometimes moans at me because she's very end in mind person, and
futurist.
Yeah, she's very, very futurist, and creating that alternate future, and yeah, you know, you've got to practice going there as well.
But that's interesting, you know, because that actually speaks to synergy, which is I was going to talk about next. Is probably the next weakest one for me is synergize. You know, I was also talking to my wife Kerry after our last podcast about synergy, and I was celebrating the fact that in our marriage, I've been married 27 years now. We feel like we're coming into a space where we are celebrating our differences. And anyone knows Kerry and I, my wife is completely opposite to me. I'm the futurist. I have ideation. I'm the one with the ideas. And Kerry's far more grounded, you know, which in our early years of our relationship, you know, I would have probably seen as a problem, you know, that needs to be fixed. But now I have really come into the space where actually, you know what, if I'd listened to my wife a lot more in the past, I'd be in less trouble, you know. And that's that whole thing of synergy, welcoming and deliberately building with people who are not like you, have very differing strengths to you. And, you know, I've certainly seen in my own marriage that by bringing that in and enjoying those differences, it has really brought life into my life, and direction, and stopped me from making some fairly horrendously big mistakes, I guess, too, in life. Yeah, so synergize is certainly something that I've got to work hard at. I've got to celebrate that.
Yeah. So yeah, as you've been talking, I've sort of thinking, an idea to do with the habits would be to maybe definitely not overthink this, but if you take each of the 7 habits and you actually sort of scored yourself out of 1 to 10, and it's like, so you take be proactive out of 1 to 10, how am I showing up in this particular principle?
Yes.
And maybe go back to the book and sort of read it, and then probably, a nice question to ask is, what do I need to do that moves us up by 1? But probably the one that scores the lowest would clearly be, I need to dial this up. I think, as I look at these habits, I don't think there's one where you would say it's not needed. When we talk about strengths, we might say, make your strengths stronger, weaknesses, get somebody else to do it for you. And I think in the strength finder way of thinking, there's a lot of merit and wisdom in that. But I think when it comes to principles, I don't know whether that applies, because you want all these principles to be in a healthy place.
Yes. Yes, I mean, the principles are not strengths. Strengths are inherent in us. There are things that are there, and there are things that aren't there. But principles are like books that we take off the shelf. We get to choose whether to use them or not. It doesn't mean the principles are not. The principles will always work, but they'll only ever work if you choose to use them.
Yes.
And you have to use them. Whether you like them or don't like them. They've got to be used, It's like the principle of the farm. If you don't hone the field and prepare it, and you don't put seed in the ground, you're not going to have a harvest. And sometimes you've got to do the part of the farming work that you least enjoy doing, because it's a principle, right?
Yeah, that's, again, so well put. It's a great way to probably be ending this off, is that analogy of the farm. These principles make the soil fertile.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to check them out, and whether you agree with them or not, they're there.
Yeah.
If you seek to understand, people will be more prepared to listen to you. Yeah.
Exactly.
If you
The farming analogy is one that I know Stephen Covey uses a lot. He talks about education. Getting an education is like farming. You can't just cram. You can't just do nothing and then expect a harvest in the last month. You can pass the test that way, but you don't get an education. And I think our lives are like the field. There are times when we are pulling stones out, and there are times when we purposely have to let some parts of our life lie fallow, and that's not easy either. And then there are times when we're putting seed in, we're putting stuff in, and then there are times when there is massive fruit to show for it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So good. So good. Yeah.
So Mike, last words, last comments on 7 habits.
Yeah, well, I've just so enjoyed reflecting on them again. And I think as we started off, these things are just timeless, and let's just keep going back to them, especially in uncertainty, disruption, changing worlds. If we apply the principle long enough and consistently, we will be strong.
Yeah, I like that. Consistently. I think there's a big word. That's another talk. But consistently using the principles will always bring fruit in our lives. And I think that's well put. Mike, thanks for the
Nice.
7 weeks or 7 sessions on this, and yeah, look forward to the next book.